BOPIE needs a matched pair of Portuguese cut amethyst to make a pair of approximately 6mm earrings for a client. So there are two issues. One, making sure the color matches, and two, making sure they are cut exactly the same. For the color, I'll use the same gemstone, which should make them a match unless there's some zoning issues. In fact, I'll cut 5 stones the same, so I should have 2 pieces that match. I'll have to cut 2 larger pieces of amethyst rough. One piece I'll cut into 2 smaller pieces, and the other I'll cut into 3 smaller pieces. I'm thinking that even with all the things that could possibly go wrong, I should have no problem having one matched pair of earrings by starting with 5 stones. But fate often has a way of proving me wrong. The next issue is to make sure they are cut exactly the same. Well, using the same gem cutting diagram will make sure they are about the same. But on top of that, fortunately for me, the Ultratech uses keyed dops for both the flat and cone-shaped dops. And since the customer wants a round gem, like the Portuguese cut we're going to use, this means I will be using both the flat and the cone-shaped dops. I'll need the flat dop for holding the stone while I facet the pavilion or bottom half of the stone, and I'll then transfer to the cone-shaped dop for holding the stone while I facet the crown or upper half of the stone. Keyed dops allow us to pull the dop out of the machine and replace it with another keyed dop holding another stone at each stage of the faceting. Once I set our Ultratech machine for cutting the girdle, for example, I can simply work through each of the other 4 stones without having to adjust the angle or the height of our mast. Basically, I'll be mass producing 5 stones and only have to make adjustments to the Ultratech machine for the first stone as I work around the girdle. If I didn't have keyed dops, I would have to align each gemstone for each row or tier as I replace the dops in my amethyst assembly line. Basically, it wouldn't work. Now, I've never tried this before. I've never taken advantage of the feature of the keyed dop, so let's see how it works out. So I've marked this piece of amethyst and I'm going to cut it into 3 pieces. Once here, once here, and that should give me enough to make 3 6mm round stones. Plenty left over. So we'll cut that and work on our amethyst earrings. And this piece of amethyst weighs in at 22.8 carats. Okay, I just started preforming my pair of amethyst earrings, and because the Ultratech has a slanted dops, they have the little V shape, so they always go in the same way, and because I'm doing a pair of amethyst 4 earrings, I'm going to use this feature by the Ultratech, and as I'm preforming, I'm going to cut both stones one after the other while I've got the machine already set up for each tier. So at least through the preforming, when I get to the finer cuts, I don't think I'll be able to do that because I don't want to get out of alignment, but for these just the preforming stages, that'll work fine. Preforming our girdle, if we measure it, it's right at 8mm. So we've got another 2mm to take off, and we used our 600 topper lap. So without changing anything, we just switch out our 1 amethyst with our 2nd amethyst, and because the dops are keyed, again, because of that angle, it's only going to go in one way. Tighten up the set screw, and our 2nd dop is ready to go without changing anything to cut at the same angle for our girdle. And so if we were cutting multiple stones, you could save a lot of time. You don't have to make any adjustments on your machine. So we'll continue to facet our amethyst that are going to become a pair of earrings. So far so good. So I'm ready to start pre-polishing with the 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap. Okay, for one of our 5 Amethyst, there's a fracture, a chip, kind of goes at an angle like this right there. So I'm going to have to cut this particular stone down lower than the others. I'm going to cut it down until that fracture goes away. So I can still do the assembly line one by one, but I'll have to do this one last for each tier, because even though I use the same angles, I'll have to lower the mast on this one if it takes a little bit to work out that fracture. So from our group of 5, we're down to 4. Okay, I finished the third stone of 5 on the pavilion, finished polishing it, and it's going pretty quick. Once you get it set up with these keyed discs, you simply polish that tier, then you remove that stone and dop, put your next one in from the assembly line. So you tighten it up, and even with these very small stones, it's perfectly aligned. Then you simply go to the next stone, and you can see this tier is 39, so it's already set up. It's touching the ultra laps right now, so this one and the previous one were perfectly aligned, and that's because of the keyed dop system. Now there's 2 of these stones that I had to work a little extra on, a little inclusion, or cut it down a little smaller. So in those cases, when I switch out the stones and the dops, I have had to adjust my armature to go up or down a little bit, but it's still much quicker because I'm just working one tier at a time. I'm not having to make adjustments, and this assembly line's going very well. So 2 more to go, and then we'll be ready to transfer to the to cut the crown. Okay, I finished polishing the pavilion of my 5 Amethyst, and now we're going to transfer them in the transfer jig. As far as equipment goes, I have 4 3mm and 2 4mm dops, both the cone and the flat. So I wouldn't buy extra dops. I mean, I bought them already, so I already have 3 of everything at least. So I wouldn't think to buy 5 3mm dops just to do assembly line. And I have 2 Ultratech transfer jigs. I would buy a second transfer jig, not initially when you start cutting, but eventually. I do use my second transfer jig all the time. I'm always working between 2 transfer jigs. Would I buy 5 so I could do assembly line production? No, 2 is fine. So transferring these 5 dops will take 3 rounds through the transfer jig, 2, and then wait for the super glue to set up and put 2 more in, and then wait for the super glue to set up and then 1 more in. So it'll take a few hours to get the dops set enough where I can pull them out of the transfer jig. But I would not buy 5 transfer jigs. Now, because these are small stones, I'll be using super glue to transfer, and the super glue I use is Loctite 404. I've learned to put the date that I bought it, mark that on the bottle. I keep it in the refrigerator after everybody told me I should, and then after a year I'll replace it. The same goes for my 2-part epoxy. After a year I'll replace it. I don't keep that in the refrigerator. We're going to transfer our dops. Again, Ultratech, the transfer jigs are also keyed like our dops. Our dops have this keyed back in, so when you put them in the transfer jig, they go like that, and then you tighten it down so it's snug. Right now I don't need it all the way tight, just snug. And the top one is where we're going to transfer one of our stones. Same thing, it's keyed, it goes in one way just like that, and that will mean that the top and the bottoms will be lined up when I'm done transferring them. And I'm hoping so, because if they're not, then I'm going to have to spend a little bit of time on each stone, and that'll slow down the assembly line. But as long as the transfer jigs work properly, and as long as the equipment's keyed properly, I should be able to continue along on my assembly line. So what I'm going to do is simply put a drop of super glue in the cone part after I've stood it up, and push the top dop down on the bottom to set these stones. So we'll be ready soon to work on the crown. So we're ready for the top half of our amethyst. So as we transfer dops, what I normally do is spend time making sure that the dop is properly aligned by lining up one of the facets, making sure it's flat at 96 degrees. But since it's important that the keyed dops in the transfer was done correctly, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to instead set up for our first cut at 42 degrees. So you just lock it in place, and we need to see that if we are lined up properly. If we're not lined up properly, then I have to cut each stone individually, because I'd be spending a lot of time transferring the stones, transferring dops after each tier, and having to line up the stone. So, but we'll be able to see as soon as we cut, if the cut is not straight from the top facet and parallel with the line along the bottom of the facet for the girdle, we will see that we're out of the line. So take a quick look. Okay, so you can see the where I just cut at 42, it goes down across on the facet that I cut and back up. Well, the part that goes across, that has to be level with the bottom line of facets on this girdle, and that way we're properly aligned. So it looks like we're aligned, but it's hard to tell because of the distance between the facets right now. So let me quickly cut one more, and let me cut down a little further, and we'll see. I'm using our 600 topper. Let me go ahead and cut the 6 tooth and the 12 tooth. So I'll cut 3 facets, and having cut 3 facets, we should be able to see if they're straight. Now it's the 600 grit and it's a topper, so it doesn't cut perfect, not designed to. I think I'm a little bit off. I'm not sure, because the top part, they're cut, this is a little higher than this part. It looks like they're cutting down a tiny bit. So I'm not sure I'm in calibration, but let me try it. Let me try it a little bit more. Okay, so I went ahead and went around the first row or first tier with 600 topper, 600 diamond grit, just to see if we're properly aligned. And looks like this first row of cuts lines us up properly. So just to double check it, what should happen is if I switch out my dops without aligning the second one, I should be able to drop the second of the 5 right into the machine. So what should happen, if we're properly aligned, is this row I just go down and cut it without moving the mast, and I should come up with a row of facets that has a straight line along the girdle. So let me take a look. Okay, so I went on a second, put in a second dop. It looks like everything's aligned properly. I didn't have to adjust the dop alignment. So it looks like this keyed system works. So we'll continue with using the preforming of our crown and work through our 5 Portuguese cut pieces of amethyst. Okay, for the second half of our amethyst stones, the crown, I'm going to use Gearloose's dark side with cerium oxide. Brent over at MBK told me that the dark side works really good with quartz, so we're going to give it a try. The instructions from John over at Gearloose says the most common error is to use too much polish. So don't overload the lap and don't flood the lap with water. Just use enough to feel a drag while polishing, but at the same time, do not run dry. So we're going to try to follow all those instructions. Our bat sticks, cerium oxide, and it also says no need to flood. Let's see how this works. Okay, I'm going to put some water on it. Spin clean that off a little bit. And we'll put some cerium oxide. I don't know if I rub this in. I don't know. Give it a try this way. This is how I use the diamond grit, so I don't know. We'll find out. John over at Gear Loose is probably screaming in his chair saying, "No, that's not it, that's not the way, no." But we'll give it a try. So I guess I need a slow drip, I don't know. Angle set at 42 degrees. Our gear is the 96 tooth. We move our arm down until it touches the lap. Turn it to about 600 RPMs. Okay, I feel it dragging. Take a look. And it probably needs a drip of water, I think. Try a little bit more. So it is polishing up. So I need to work with this a little bit. I think I need to add a little bit more cerium oxide. Maybe I add it as the machine's turning, rotating. See if that does anything. That might be too much, but we'll see. John, if you're screaming in your chair, let me know. Row polished. The dark side by Gear Loose worked just fine. It's polished up nicely. I'm not sure the technique yet, how much cerium oxide to put in, how much water to put in, how slow to drip. I'm not quite sure. I got it to work, but I need to practice on a number of more facets before I can make sure I've got the right technique down. So I can't really tell you the technique to use, but it did work, and I'll continue on with the remaining 4 tiers, including the table of our amethyst. Okay, I've been polishing our amethyst with the dark side from Gear Loose, this dark side lap that I just got. Brent recommended it, and it's doing a great job. I used the Ultra Laps. They do great. I'm a big fan of the Ultra Laps. They polish wonderfully. The dark side is doing a great job. I initially tried it with the cerium oxide bat sticks from Gear Loose, and they immediately polished the facet, but with these Crayola crayons looking things, I wasn't able to move the facet. I needed a little bit more aggressive cerium oxide, and I wasn't getting that. But this was my very first attempt with the bat stick on the dark side, so it's probably a technique that I need to work on. John Gear Loose, Rolf over at Gear Loose, said that the dark side is a lot of technique. So what I do is I also used another of his products. I'm just all kinds of products from Gear Loose right now. So this is Brother Zachary snake fluid, and it's not as oily as the snake oil, which I use for other purposes. Professor Ignatius snake oil. I do like it. I'm using it. But the way I use Brother Zachary's snake fluid is I put 2 drops on the dark side and rub it in, and then I went back to my old cerium oxide powder from the bottom of my cabinet, bottom of my toolkit, that I have no idea how many years ago I bought it, haven't been using it. And I would go in, and after I rubbed the Brother Zachary snake fluid, my finger would already be wet. You can see it's there. I just dip it in the cerium oxide and put the white powder on the dark side disc. I use 2 fingerfuls, very little, and rub it in all the way around. And then I use a slow drip of water. I kept my water running so you can see that's the drip I'm using. And that combination is working perfectly. It's polishing beautifully. In comparing it to the Ultra Laps, of course with the dark side I'm getting a perfectly flat facet, whereas with the Ultra Laps being Mylar, the facets are ever so slightly rounded. You can notice it under magnification. Ultralapse polish and cut a little faster, but I imagine that's just if I put more cerium oxide on the dark side, it probably could cut even faster. But what I'm doing right now is moving the facet slightly as I polish it, and it's working great. So dark side, doing good. I would not recommend a new cutter who's just buying their first faceting machine and breaking their budget on discs, laps, and equipment. I would not recommend you buy the dark side initially. You can do perfectly fine with the cerium oxide and the aluminum oxide ultralapse, which are disposable. And if I was brand new, I would use those if I had a budget and I broke the bank on my faceting machine. But later, I would say, so far for me, the dark side's been amazing. So back to polishing our amethyst. Okay, on this one facet right here, I've got a little bit of what's called orange peel, because it looks like the outside of an orange, just like wrinkly. I'm trying to move the light so you can see it. It's not very pronounced. It's very, very slight orange peel, and that happens just the way amethyst forms sometimes. So I wanted to show you how I normally get rid of that, and all I do is I rotate the lap in the other direction. So I don't change my mast, I don't change anything, I just rotate in the other direction, so now it's going counterclockwise, and you always make sure that you've got the quill going in the direction of your lap. So I'm going to go to the other side. I don't adjust the height, I don't do anything, I just run it over there a few times and take a look at it. Clean it up about halfway. Do a little bit more. Counterclockwise. Over to the other side. And the orange peel is gone. Let's see if I can show you. It's really hard to see. I apologize for that. So again, it's this facet that we're talking about. It wasn't much of an orange peel to start with. It was very small. Anyway, that's how I normally get rid of orange peel. It normally works. It's how I get rid of little scratches that pop up from time to time. So back to polishing. Again, that just comes up every once in a while. So just reverse your lap. Don't make the mistake of putting the quill down where you normally do and have the lap turning into your stone. You don't want that. You always want your stone going in the direction of the lap. So like now we'll be going clockwise, and the quill is pointed in the direction the lap's going. Don't reverse that. Okay, I've got all 5 of my amethyst polished and ready to cut and polish the table. So I put the table adapter into the quill and we're ready to cut our table. Okay, that's the last of polishing the tables of our 5 amethyst. So now we'll soak them in acetone and weigh them, measure them, and take a final look at them. So it saved a lot of time, this assembly line on the crown process for sure, on the table, because I only had to set up our table aligner once instead of having to set it up for each different stone if I was cutting individually. So that saved some time. All right, let's see what they look like after they come out of the acetone bath. Overall, as far as the Portuguese design goes, I cut this design often as it is one of BOPIE'S favorite designs. It is an easy design to cut, but it has a lot of facets. I would recommend this design for a new cutter, but not as the very first round stone they cut. My unscientific guess is that I cut these 5 stones in about the time it would have taken me to cut a little more than 2 stones individually, just because of the keyed dot feature that the Ultratech has. Plus, after lining up the girdle with the first stone, it assured that all 5 stones have basically the same width. They match. So these keyed dops are awesome. However, I don't normally have a lot of rough of the same size, and I don't often want to cut the same design in multiple stones. So this method works great for earrings, but I'm not going to start mass producing gemstones in an ongoing assembly line anytime soon. Plus, if one wanted to go crazy with this assembly line process, you would have to buy a lot more equipment. You'd need more dops and a couple more transfer jigs. And plus, I was lucky. If a stone had happened to come off the dop, for example, I would probably have had to work that stone separately, as I doubt I could get it aligned properly in the same dop again. So as far as cutting stones in an assembly line, this worked great. I saved a lot of time by not having to reset the angle of my machine for each stone as I would have if I had cut each stone individually. Happy faceting, everyone.